We want to tell you about our friend Heidi. She's an amazing artist and designer, and she is the person who's designed our new logo. It's amazing, and every day we notice another detail we'd somehow missed before. You can also employ her services if you so wish, because she can do you a fantastic portrait of your dog or cat. Just send her some photos of your pet and she'll put her own special talents to work, creating a work of art that is both unique and special to you and your special friend. But these are no ordinary portraits. No. She makes them into characters that accentuate their personality. She's done some themed as pirates, hillbillies, theatre ushers, old ladies and gentlemen, pilots. She even made one into Godzilla. You could even have one done of your pet as a mascot for your favourite ball team. Of course, if you just want a normal portrait, she can do that too. We really recommend that you go along to her website or Instagram page to see more of her work. Her website is www.angelbot3d, that's ANGELBOT 3D.com. And her Instagram is @angelbot3d. You won't be disappointed. Oh, and incidentally, this is not a paid advertisement. It's a recommendation for a friend who's really talented. Hello, and thank you for tuning in to the Weird, Wacky and Wonderful Stories podcast. Now, please welcome, all the way from their front living room, your hosts, Shelley and Bella. Hey everybody, and welcome to episode 43 of the Weird, Wacky and Wonderful Stories podcast.
It amazes me that we're on 43.
Are you going to say hello to them?
Oh, hi. Hi, everybody. Sorry, I was losing track for a second.
You're losing your memory with age.
Oh, kiss my butt.
Done that too many times already today.
You better keep doing it.
So, guys, we got a treat for you today. We have a chap with us who is a cryptid researcher here in the UK. This is an interview that we recorded with him earlier on this week. So please sit back, relax, and enjoy. Andy McGrath is a cryptozoology enthusiast with over 25 years of research and obsession about the unknown creatures living right under our noses here on this tiny island in the North Atlantic. Author of Beasts of Britain and speaker at CryptidCon International Cryptozoology Conference and others, he's also currently working on his own TV series under the same name, Beasts of Britain. Whilst continuing his passion for writing about cryptids and out-of-place animals in other parts of the world, his new title, Beasts of North America, is planned for release in 2019. Please welcome to the show, Andy McGrath.
Hello, hi. Thank you for having me both. Happy to be here.
Pleasure's all ours. So we're really interested to speak to you because obviously you've covered some quite interesting beasts in your book, and I tend to find that a lot of the things that we hear about tend to be things across the water. So it's nice to hear somebody bring into light the animals and different beasts, if you like, that may be found here within the UK.
Well, no, I mean, absolutely. That's one of the main reasons that I started it, actually, was because I've been into this so long. And when I decided I was going to write about it, I thought, well, nobody really ever looks at our country, the United Kingdom. We've got a rich history of cryptid sightings, if you like, or a lot of folklore and things like werewolves and things like that, black shuck, demon dogs. But what I was interested in more than that was looking for modern sightings of these creatures and said, well, look, if we can find some modern sightings, maybe we can put ourselves back on the map and say this is an interesting place to investigate as well. And that's exactly what happened. There were so many things that I discovered just by researching what we could have here in the British Isles.
So, Andy, before we get started, I'd just like to make one thing clear for our international listeners. A lot of time when people look at Great Britain, they actually call it England, when in reality we've got Scotland up in the north, Wales out on the west, and the rest of it being England. Yeah, I mean, I thought
that was one of the things about it as well. I mean, being I'm not a true Welshman, I suppose, in the way that the Welsh would define it. I grew up in Wales, I was born there, but I don't have any ethnic Welsh blood, so to speak, but I actually have Irish and English and the rest of it. And, same Isle, but you do get used to hearing your country referred to as Wales, England. It's lovely to be here in Wales, England, and etc. And that's fine. I think the English have, they've earned their reputation as the sort of the primary place that's referred to when you think of the country. They did, after all, take over a third of the known world surface, and that's fine. I'd rather not take responsibility for that myself personally as a Welsh person. So I don't mind if people call it England, because that means we weren't involved. It's fine for me. But it's one of those interesting things. I was just up in Scotland last weekend, actually, when we spoke, Shelley, and what you realise being in Wales, and I've lived in England now for 10 years, or going to Ireland or Scotland especially, we are very distinct peoples, ethnic peoples of this island. And even the little parts of the island we all inhabit have their own sort of environmental characteristics to them as well, which seems to have been shaped by the kinds of people that live there, or vice versa. That we've been shaped by those environmental surroundings that we're in. And the Welsh, for example, it always rains where we are, doesn't it? And you're just used to that. And when it rains here in England, it does, of course, but it's not as common as it is in Wales. I just go out in a normal coat for a walk without an umbrella, because it just doesn't seem like anything to me. And people are like, "Where's your umbrella? Why haven't you got your hood up?" But I'm just like, not really rain. It's just an intense shower.
Yeah. I think Bella's got used to rain since she's been living here.
Yeah, you've got to. You really have to.
The first time I ever came to this country, where was the place we went where they had all the carnival, like the rides and flambards or whatever?
Yeah, in Helston in Cornwall.
And we're walking around and it's raining and nobody has an umbrella except for me. And I thought, well, why doesn't anybody use umbrellas? And you went into that whole thing about how you hate umbrellas and all that. But yeah, in the time I've been in this country, I've seen more rain than in my whole life.
Well, in Wales especially. The worst place I ever went for rain, actually, Bella, was Ireland. My first trip to Ireland, I got off the airport, and growing up in Wales, of course, used to a good bit of rain. Spent a lot of time in West Wales and in the Valley and all those other places where it's nice and rainy. So I get off the plane in Ireland, and the rain is hitting us directly sideways. It was horizontal rain. It was completely sideways, and this wind almost blew us off the front of the airport, sort of the front there as you come out to get your taxi or whatever. And a friend pulled up, and she said, "Oh, turned out nice again," in a jokey kind of Irish way. And you could feel the damp coming up through the walls. There was moss growing on everything. And I thought, oh, my goodness, these guys, they've really got it wet.
It makes us a hardy bunch, doesn't it?
It does. It really does. And we're never disappointed. I consider this to be a dry, sunny place. Surrey in England, a dry, sunny part of the country. That's my view.
Well, you're in on the East Coast anyway, so you get a lot more dry than what we do. But I think that's what makes this country nice and green anyway. I think that would miss the rain if it wasn't here.
Yes.
You mentioned earlier, quite rightly so, that when I initially spoke to you to set up this interview, you were actually on the banks of Loch Ness. And now I know that you'd rushed up there to investigate a sighting that had been reported. Can you tell us any more about that? Yeah,
well, actually, when I spoke to you, I was up in the mountain above Loch Ness on the Altnacreesh walk, and I probably sounded a bit puffy because I just walked up. I don't know what the elevation was, but everything was on sort of 95 degrees, and just walked up to the top, and I was overlooking Loch Ness from that mountain as we spoke. And I went up there to the mouth of the River Oich in Fort Augustus to investigate a sighting that was made by quite a successful military historian and author called Ricky Phillips, or Ricky D. Phillips, I think he goes under. And he also does a little work there on, I think, one of the tourist buses. And he'd come up, and his tourists had gone off on the Loch Ness cruise. And the Caledonian Canal is right there, and you've got the Loch Ness cruise boat parked, and it goes off into the loch from there for a big trip. So all his tourists had jumped onto the boat and gone on their trip, and he was waiting around for them. It's about an hour. Now, he went around just to the left of the head of the loch there, where you have the River Oich coming into the loch, and he was taking some photos on Instagram. Apparently, he was taking them on Instagram because his phone is full up of pictures for his own projects. And he snapped what appeared to be a long neck with a sort of a sharp, beaky kind of head on top of it, and maybe a slight hump behind it, sticking out of the water. Now, he said it was dark grey, around rugby ballish kind of shaped head with a sort of high ridges over the eyes. I've seen a picture in the paper, actually. And that it seemed to have a bit of a frill going down its neck. Now, the picture, it's very dark. You can't really make out what's there. There are some details. We've lightened it. I could make out maybe a bit of an eye. but there's no guarantee that it is what it is. At the moment, I'm just mainly looking at the character of the individual. I can't quite understand why somebody in his position would hoax him. He already seems to be quite fed up with the attention, and most people, I think, once they reveal some sighting or picture that they have, it doesn't take very long before they're tired of the negative attention, or people like me, researchers calling you all the time to ask questions.
Yeah.
I think we spoke several times while I was at the lock about, am I in the location now? Am I in the location now? I sort of tweeted him 4 pictures from the bridge to the river. Which one is it in? And he told me. And of course, on our little forums, I've got another forum called Nessie and Friends for lake monsters, and there's others like the Zombie Plesiosaur Society and Steve Feltham's page as well. The guy who's been up at Loch Ness for over 25 years. Everybody, of course, is tearing it to pieces in the sense of intricately looking at all of the details. So it's interesting. I think he's credible, but he doesn't have the negative, so to speak. He took it on Instagram. He immediately pinched and zoomed and sent it. So there's no metadata. There's nothing to substantiate it. There's no background. It's hard, but this is what somebody who was not expecting to capture a lake monster and doesn't get involved in this business would be doing.
Yes.
They wouldn't be saying, I better get my metadata sorted out and make sure the background is fine. And it was just an accident,
Yeah.
And we can't view those people like that. Yes, he could be faking. I don't think he is. He seems to be pretty certain about what he saw. And that was enough for me anyway to get up there at least for 3 days and just have a poke about, which I did unsuccessfully. But that's normally the way it goes anyway.
But at least you got boots on the ground. There's a lot of people that do sort of armchair investigations, aren't there? At least you got boots on the ground and you got straight up there. Yeah,
and I got a feeling for the area as well. I mean, I stayed there quite late into the evening on quite a number of nights, from the point where the light was going until it was very, very dark, and kind of just sat there on the banks nice and quiet. It's one of those things you have to do it. But I always think about Loch Ness. There's people that live there 50, 60 years and are on the water who never see it. And then, every year, 7 or 8 or 9, or what is it now, 13 tourists last year, 2018, claim to have seen something. And a lot of head and neck sightings too, like this one that Ricky Phillips had, and a lot more as well. It seems to be those who aren't looking, seem to find it. And my explanation for that personally, when you're looking for an animal like Bigfoot or big cats or whatever, is looking looks like hunting. And I think most animals are aware of hunting-like behavior. So when you're seeking, maybe that's off-putting. I don't know. That's just my excuse for not finding anything.
So have you always had a fascination with cryptid, or did something happen to you that made you want to investigate and research them?
Just the normal stuff. I mean, I'm 42 years old, so, person of my age, it's the Patterson Gimlin footage, the Robert Rhines exploration of Loch Ness in the 70s and 80s, the Nessie head and neck that he got underwater, all those great bits of footage that came out with the In Search of programs with Leonard Nimoy. Awesome things, or Arthur C. Clarke's Mysterious.
That was the one. Arthur C. Clarke's World of Strange Powers was the one.
Oh, it was. Yeah, I had the other one. It was. I was more interested in the unusual animals and things like that. Mysterious World. That's right. But World of Strange Powers, that was interesting too. I was never really paranormally interested in things. I'm still not. I tend to focus on animals, or what I think are animals.
So regarding Nessie then, if there is such a creature, whether you call it a sea or river monster or whatever, what do you think it could be? So
my opinion right now falls into the unpopular style of opinion, and I think it's a type of plesiosaur of some kind. It's not the only sighting that we have in the British Isles of a lake monster or a sea monster. There's plenty actually all over the country and all around the coast that have been going on for hundreds of years and still are reported very recently. They generally tend to fall into this type of animal. Now, I know that's not popular. The prevailing paradigm says these creatures died out, so they can't still be around. But just because it seems like they died out, it doesn't mean we can ignore the explanations that people are given, the descriptions. I don't know of any giant type of eel that can raise its neck 4 or 5 feet out of the water. I don't know any seal that has a neck like that or humps on its back.
Could be an
I don't.
anaconda, one of those
But still,
huge.
but they can't do that either, and they would not survive in Scottish waters. They would die very quickly, actually, that kind of animal, because it's so cold. And the loch is up to 750 feet deep in places. It was actually quite mild when I was there this time of year, and I think it was hit -1 once or twice. They said there should be about 2 feet of snow by now. It's a cold area, even in the summer. Couldn't support an exotic snake of any kind whatsoever.
Yeah.
We went to Lake Windermere a couple of years ago,
Mm.
and I know there's been sightings. Are these
Yes.
sightings more prevalent than at Loch Ness? Do you hear more about them? Or although before you answer that, I just got to say one thing. You didn't tell me anything about Loch Ness monster sightings at Lake Windermere.
Well, it's not Loch Ness. Is it Bowness, Andy?
Bonessie.
Okay,
Bowness,
well, I never would have got on a boat that you were driving if I'd have heard anything about that. Just saying.
I've been to. I did a little. There's a little chapter in my book about Bonessie, and I did a little expedition there last April. We filmed like a little teaser trailer style mock pilot, the TV series that I'm still trying to pitch and still trying to sell. And there have been a lot of sightings there, more or less since 2006. They really picked up the sightings, and there's been a few photographed ones. There was the Tom Pickles sighting in 2011, which is a series of humps in the water. That was him and a work colleague were kayaking when they saw that. So it was about, I think, 3 to 4 car lengths long. There's been lots of sightings, but the ever awesome photograph sighting was by, I think her name was Ellie Williams, who worked for Photographer magazine in London, and she popped up to Windermere to take sort of seasonal photos throughout the day, and she had a time-lapse camera. Once every minute it took a photo throughout the entire day, so she put it next to the lake. She went away, she came back the next day, took it away, and there was this big sharp hump with a long neck. This is in 2014. And she said, it's far too big to be a swan. It couldn't be a prank because nobody could have put it there, because I've got a photo every minute.
Every minute,
I'm capturing, and there was no other activity other than the creature appeared and the photo was gone, and the next one. And it looks like, like a Nessie, like a humped creature with a big long neck. Now, there were 2 girls and 2 guys, 2 couples that rented one of those little red and white boats that you rented. I rented when I was there to get out into the lake, those ones that feel like they're going to swamp every time a boat passes.
Yeah.
And you have to get perpendicular to those waves. That's the key, isn't it?
Yeah,
but you don't really realize it till you've been nearly sunk a few times. And so, anyway, they were coming on the lake one day. I think might be 4 years ago now. I'm not quite sure. I don't have that sighting in front of me, but I remember listening to it on YouTube. And she said it started to really rain. It was very sort of misty and heavy, and so they kind of stopped the boat and hid underneath the canopy for a few minutes just to let it pass. When suddenly this 30-foot long creature that was incredibly long, like a snake, but thick and very dark green brown, came up beside the boat, swam right past them. She could have touched it with her hand.
Wow.
And then disappeared. And there's other sightings in what's the other sorry, I have that in front of me too. Don't have a great memory. Okay, so that's Bassenthwaite Lake. There's been sightings and photos there in the 70s, and all the other connected waters too. Now, most of the sightings there, just at the side point in Windermere, are near the River Rothay, which is in the north there. And I think there's a trout farm halfway up. Most of the Loch Ness sightings that aren't mid-loch are all near river mouths as well. So all the villages with the river mouths, they have the most sightings. And my theory is that it's good fishing. The fish come out from the river into the deep water. They're vulnerable. There's lots of nutrients at the river mouths. So it's a greater food source. Just a theory.
So what are some other types of creatures that you've investigated in the UK or that you're interested in?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, in the book, there's a whole bunch of things to look at. And primarily it's lake and sea monsters, British Bigfoot, things Dogman, or the chapter is actually called Dogman Rebranding the Werewolf. So there's a thing on sightings like that. Big cats, little people, out of place animals. But one of the very interesting ones about the Dogman or the werewolf I recently looked into was I actually went there, was a werewolf sighting in old Camberwell Cemetery, it's in South London. It's a spooky. I went there, took a bunch of pictures. It's a spooky old place. I just put a blog up about it actually yesterday, and there was a sighting there in 1996. Now the graveyard actually was I think it was built in 1856, and it's got about 300,000 bodies there. And as you walk into the graveyard and you're going into the deep parts, there's a forest that's growing up around a lot of these graves, and they're covered in moss and trees, and they just look like the forest has become part of the graveyard. And it's really, really kind of a spooky place. And Camberwell's a bit dicey anyway. So
yeah, my mum's from near there.
Oh, is she? So you know anyway.
Yeah,
I mean, it's it can be. I mean, these days anyway, it used to be like that. And there's still lots of nice parts of it, but it can be dicey enough anyway. And so I went down to the graveyard to check out this sighting. Now, the original sighting happened in 1996 in October, and the man was en route to see a friend. Decides to take a shortcut through Camberwell Old Cemetery to save time, when something hugely strong grabs him by the arm and smashes him into the ground. He looks up to see a large creature, dark fur and a head like a German shepherd, looking directly at him, slobbering and growling, sniffing his body up and down. And then, just as quick as it starts, beast sprints off on its back legs, and he doesn't see it again. Now, This is really curious. A really curious aspect to this sighting is the witness believed he was spared because he suffers from a disease that dogs can smell.
Ah, really?
Yes. And he says that's something called I would say it's a mundane detail in the report. You don't really need to know that, but it's something that validates that report to me, because that's somebody who's making something up. That's not really what they would think to say. Seems like a mundane detail.
Yes.
But this disease that dogs can smell, I think that's why it left me alone.
Wow.
So that's a weird one. And it's followed up in 2004 by an Irish lady who'd moved to the area and a friend, 11:30 at night. They're walking past the graveyard, Underhill Road, on the cemetery side of the road. And suddenly, a large tree in the corner of the cemetery is shaking incredibly hard, as if something really powerful is shaking it with all its might. She heard something that sounded a bit like growling, and nothing. And she said there was a really sinister feeling, and she never walked past the road ever again. And she didn't see anything, but I don't know particularly what can shake a tree that we have in our sort of wildlife.
That's going to growl. Yeah, exactly.
It's going to growl, and it can actually shake a whole tree. Yeah, so I mean that's a follow-up. I would say that's a visual and audio sighting of a kind, but we don't know if it was the same thing or not.
Do you remember the movie American Werewolf in London?
Yes.
I
Yes,
wonder
absolutely.
I wonder how many sort of sightings or whatever that popped up around that time when that movie was popular.
Well, I've actually never found a London sighting from around that time, actually, and I've looked for it, and the same thing occurred to me. Well, how about sightings that occurred around the time that maybe something that happened around the time The Howling came out, the original movie, early 80s? Great movie, by the way, 1 and 2 at least, anyway.
Yeah, they were.
But we have werewolf legends that go back hundreds and hundreds of years. And these days, of course, with the popularity of the American Dogman, it seems to have, there's a resurgence, not necessarily a resurgence, because I'd say the sightings are very few and far between, but there seems to be more attention that's being paid to it. Now, personally, for me, it's a difficult one. At least with something like Bigfoot, I can say, okay, well, we have the woodwoes in our history, the hairy man of the forest. We have lots of depictions on churches and tapestries and things like that. And that could be a type of Gigantopithecus or descendant of some kind that some people think it could still be here and avoided attention. But what animal could a bipedal canine be? I can't find it in the fossil record. I don't know what it is. People say paranormal, but I just think it's something we don't know about.
Well, they're discovering things all the time, aren't they?
They are. And sure enough, it's a big ask to say to people, there could be werewolves here and we just never knew about it, or there could be a British Bigfoot and we just never discovered it. And it sounds, when you're in the city like I am or you are, it sounds like an implausible thing until you get out there in the countryside and see that we're really underpopulated, our countryside anyway, and that there's nobody around most of the time, anywhere. And when I was in Scotland, I know in the summer it's a common walking path. I didn't see anybody for the 4 hours that I was hiking this Alp na Críoch path in the hill, I didn't hear a single animal. I didn't hear a bird tweet, nothing. Just these big, dense pine trees up on the hill going through these very dark forests. And as I was coming down, and I'm not saying this is a sighting at all, but this is just how your mind can play tricks on you, I think, sometimes. As I was coming back down the path, I circled and come back down to some deep, dark forest. I was taking a picture of some waterfall. I thought I saw somebody duck behind a tree at the top of this big hill. It was a millisecond. I don't really know if it happened or if it didn't happen. I'm up there looking for monsters, and if I think I'm going to see something in the corner of my eye, it makes sense it might be my mind. But I felt a bit funny after that. I thought, okay, look, you've just freaked yourself out. You're all alone in this forest. Millisecond, you thought you saw something. And now you've told yourself, it's possible, it's plausible. You investigate these things. What are you going to do if you're in this situation for real by yourself or one of these creatures?
Do you take anything with you to protect you, by the way, in those sort of situations?
No. I do normally, when I go out, I do normally go with other individuals. And I think that was just such a common walking path. I thought, well, let's just go out. But there were many times in parts of the forest, and I thought, there's a lot of big cat sightings around, actually. And to be honest with you, I don't believe that I'm out there looking for a Bigfoot. I'm going to get attacked by one. But I think the big cat issue is serious. And it might only be a matter of time before one of these does attack somebody. It does happen in places where they're common in other parts of the world. And that's really what I'm mostly looking out for. Can I see any big cat signs? Can I hear any sort of stalking or creeping? You wouldn't hear one anyway if it wanted to sneak up on you. I was just going to say, when I was coming back down after this imaginary sighting, as I was coming back downhill, then I started hearing sort of, little twigs snapping and rustling in the trees and things like that. But again, my mind was then focused on that. I was hyper aware and vigilant. And maybe I'm just, animals live in the forest. We hear animals move, right?
Yeah. You mentioned big cats. That's one of my big fears. I do have a little bit of a phobia of big cats. Little cats I'm allergic to, so I hate their guts anyway. But big cats, I do have a fear of. I don't know why. I think they are just killing machines, aren't they? They're made for it.
They are made for it, and it's a predator. It's an actual predator. Yeah. So some other animals. I mean, people get killed by cows every year, right?
Yeah.
Because they get trampled when they get angry or they get afraid if you walk into. I never walk through a field with any cows in, not ever, not for a shortcut. I won't even skirt the edge of the field. I'm staying out of any fields with cows because they're dangerous. But they're not going to come after me because they want to eat me. That's a different thing altogether. And I think that's the major thing. Now, with big cats, I think it's a legitimate phobia that you have. I'm afraid of bears, and although there aren't any here, as far as we know, I do think that's a legitimate, helpful phobia to be afraid of them. But we did have, there's a blog I'm writing at the moment about big cats, and I was going to try and do a map, but there's thousands and thousands of sightings. I thought, don't bother, just do a blog soon, and there's something in the book about it too.
Yeah.
That just utilizes all of the sightings people have personally given you. And I had 9 of the really good ones I really liked. And one of them was in Ruspa, which is in West Sussex. It's not far from here, actually. And I was contacted by this lady. She's a horse rider, horse breeder. And she picks up a hay consignment from a farm, a local farm up there. And what happens is, you've got an account, you just drive in, you pop your hay on the wagon and nobody's there, and you leave. It's just like a yard, basically. So she drove in one night at 9:30, 27th of November, 2017, and she's got a friend, full beams, on the Land Rover, and she gets out, she gets the hay, and as she's coming back to the car, her and her friend see this big cat, or big black cat, and she said it was about the size of a Great Dane, much heavier built, definitely male. She saw it close enough to see that it had male genitalia, and she said when it turned, I could see his body was around 4 foot long, his tail was around 3 foot long. Tail wasn't straight and almost touched the ground, even though it curved at the end. Classic, like leopard look. Yeah. The thickness of the tail was approximately thick around her wrist, and his legs were well stocky, thick or good boned, as we'd say in horse terms. That's what she said, sturdy looking legs, but very sort of mobile. Ears were also strange, not pointed but round. So that's a panther, like a leopard. And that's probably. And she said it was, she even saw it lick its face. It was that far away, maybe like a bus distance away. double-decker bus distance away, and it just looked at them, walked towards them, and just slinked off into the bush and was gone.
You wouldn't have been able to see my male genitalia, let me tell you. God, I'd have been gone.
Shrinkage.
Yeah, tell me about it.
There you go. I mean, people haven't. When she contacted me, she said, somebody told me to contact you to ask you if there's been an escape from a zoo. So she clearly was certain of what she saw. She thought it belonged in a zoo. On top of that, she rides horses, she breeds horses. She's aware of animal sizes. She's got a good judgment for size. And it's a perfect description, really. And that's it. There's not only that, when they're all over the country all the time. And this is because of this Dangerous Wild Animals Act.
I was going to say 1970 something, wasn't it?
76 or 7, I think.
Right.
Over there.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, it's around there.
So would you think that for people the other side of the water, that act was brought into place because there was a kind of a trend, wasn't there, of people buying exotic animals, big cats, etc., and then keeping them as pets, and they either weren't keeping them humanely, for want of a better word, or they were actually, in some circumstances, actually getting out of the enclosures that they were kept in, and it became a public concern.
Well, some places, you have people walking them down the road and things like that. And I've even, it's not illegal in Ireland. I've even heard tales in Ireland where you can buy tiger cubs and this and that, and there's people walking their tigers down country lanes and things. And although that's an extreme case, it shows exactly what the situation probably was before we brought this law in. It wasn't just for big cats, but now obviously you have to register locally, and they keep a register of you. That this person has a cobra, that person has a crocodile, this person has a tiger, and you need special conditions to keep them in special enclosures. And I'm just guessing it was very expensive, and a lot of people said, let's just let them go. They probably live out in the countryside for a few years and die. But of course, things like leopards, I'd say panthers, but I mean melanistic leopards, and mountain lions, cougars, pumas, whatever you want to call them, they're perfectly adept to this kind of environment. Anyway, the thing about Britain is there's so much wild food out there. So much wild food. And I actually believe that's the reason nobody's being attacked.
Well, that was going to be one of my questions, was to ask you if you've actually had any reports of, I know you mentioned the chap in Camberwell who was attacked by the dogman type figure.
Yeah.
But have you had any other reports of anyone that's been attacked by big cats or anything else?
No, actually. And I think that's very interesting. Now, with the Bigfoot phenomenon, that I'm doing a 5-part series at the moment. I've done the first 2. The first part was called Bluff, Charge, and Intimidation. So what we've had here over many years with this possible British Bigfoot or woodwose, whatever you want to call it, is this ape-like situation where the animal's angry and has bluff charged somebody. Some people have seen them visually, seen them bluff charging, or they've heard this massive commotion in the woods that they're walking in, and branches breaking and snapping and growling and howling and things like that. I mean, it was a great example of that, actually. One example, if you know that there are many, it's in 1986, and a man and his wife, they're driving past the ancient ruins of Chartley Castle in Staffordshire, England. They're forced to brake to avoid this huge stag crossing the road, followed by what they said looked like a large chimpanzee on 2 legs. Comes bounding after the stag, halfway across the road, looks directly at the couple and angrily charges their car, braking off at the last second. So in a panic, the husband tries to reverse. He stalls the car and leaves them stranded briefly at the road. And over the next 20 seconds, this huge chimp keeps charging their car before bounding off in the direction of the stag again. And there's lots of sightings like that where the creature has come after them. There was one in the 80s again, and there are more recent ones, but this one's significant because in this place called Ivy Den, Hackenthorpe, Sheffield, there's several children are playing in the woods. They're chased away by a 6 to 7 foot tall dark figure with bright red eyes. It's running up the side of the stream about 20 feet away from them. The creature jumps across the stream, and the children run. Now, what the interesting aspect of this, what happens is one of the children falls while running, only to see that the creature ceased chasing him and is just watching him a little distance away. So it's a bluff charge. It's chasing them away. It's not actually after them in any way whatsoever. It's just get off my land kind of thing,
And it probably would have been quite covetous over that land because obviously in the 80s, Sheffield was bustling, wasn't it, with its big steel trade. And so it had very sort of industrialised areas, and the sort of areas of woodland, etc., around Sheffield were obviously shrinking back because of the amount of industrial work going on there at the time.
I imagine so. I mean, Hackensthorpe and Sheffield, let's just have a look at it. I'm sure it's very different now to what it used to be. Most of our industries is completely dead, isn't it? It looks like a reasonably green kind of place. There's, the usual woods and fields skirting a large town, a large-ish town. Most of the country looks that way. You're on your train or you're going up the motorway and you look out. A lot of people, when they come here, they're very surprised to see it's green as far as the eye can see. But what they don't actually think about is that's just as far as they can see from the motorway. If you go further, it just goes on forever and ever. It's a great land, I did this, and I'm sorry to overtalk here actually, but just to mention this really, really quickly. I did this study called What's with the Habitude, and it was basically about, not proving that there's a Bigfoot here or anything, but could there be? Because people were saying, well, there's no habitat. And what I found was this great study, and it was in 2012, and it was called the UK National Ecosystem Assessment. It's a government study, and they were surprised to discover that only 6.8% of the UK's total land area could be classified as urban, figure inclusive of rural development and roads. And when they broke that figure down amongst the 4 primary nations of the UK, it was even worse. So, it was 10.6% of England was urban, 1.9% of Scotland, 3.6% of Northern Ireland, and 4.1% of Wales. This is like a whopping 93% of the UK total. It's not urban.
Yeah.
And then even 54% of the land in the towns and cities was green space.
Well, if you think about it, I've seen these programs on TV where they show those monkeys that now can live in the city with the people, and they somehow adapt. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
And there's loads of them. They had one on the other week about, I think it was like an otter family or something, and they would come up onto the, they were trying to, they weren't afraid of people.
No, of course.
But here, like you're saying, there's so much open land where nobody ever even goes. So how do you even know what's there and what isn't?
That's it. I mean, nobody's walking there essentially, and not to overlay the point, but even when I was in Fort Augustus in Loch Ness recently, I was looking into Loch Ness, and you're always shocked by the lack of lights surrounding the loch. There's not much habitation around there. And I asked the landlady from the B&B what the population of Fort Augustus was, and she said, we're the biggest town outside of Inverness. We have 600 residents here. And of course, it increases, during the summer when the tourism is high. But generally speaking, there's 600 people who live in the biggest town around that area, and that's the most popular lake monster spot in Scotland. And yet, there's 31? I think it's 31,460 lochs and lochans in Scotland. Many of them join to the sea, so it's kind of like, well, this is just the one main area everybody goes. 250, 300,000 people a year visited. And actually, yet, there's only 7 or 8 sightings, or sometimes 1 or 2 sightings a year, which as a creature is really shy. If you've got 250,000 people training their eyes on the loch, for months and months every year, and only 5 or 6 people, 7 or 8, or this year 13 people claim to see something even. Just claim. That's not a lot. You'd expect a lot of people looking to be seeing a lot more.
Yeah.
And that to me is actually more proof of the Loch Ness Monster than there's more proof that people aren't making things up as much, because otherwise you'd be expecting a lot more misidentifications to be coming forward.
Aren't they seen also in like Loch Lochy and
less so, but they are seen that way. So one of the things I did when I was there, I walked from Loch Ness. I wanted to walk to Loch Oich, and I walked along the Caledonian Canal on the left, River Oich on the right, and it's just separated by a road. I actually managed to make it all the way down to Loch Kaitra, which is on the way. They have been seen in Loch Oich infrequently, and Loch Lochy too. And my theory was that sometimes the creatures go out that way to the sea. It's long, it's drawn out. There's some shallow bits in the rivers. I think they would have to get out at 1 or 2 points. It's not a solid theory, to be honest with you, but I think it's plausible. I have been seen in Loch Heel and Loch Linya, the areas that join into the sea, these sea lochs. So there seems to be a route of some kind. Just we don't really know what it is.
Not that long ago, they used to say that there was no such thing as the giant squid. And they, some people were like, no, we saw it, we know, and people were like, no, that can't be, that's not real. And then come to find out, it is.
Hang on a second. And what do you do now, Bella, if you see a giant squid in a museum, do you go, oh my goodness, a giant squid? Or just go, oh, giant squid.
Yeah, exactly.
And that was the Kraken. That was the Kraken. For thousands of years or hundreds of years, that was the Kraken. Oh, the Kraken got us. They pulled the boat under the Kraken. And suddenly, oh, come on, sailors' tales, the Kraken, sure, the Kraken. Oh, look, Kraken, squid, whatever. I think perhaps in the future, we'll be looking at one of those dead Bigfoot exhibits in a museum, or maybe, a dead sea monster exhibit of some kind, and saying, oh, yeah, that's so-and-so, whatever the name we're using for it is now. That's the
McGrath monster.
That's the McGrath monster. Remember how they discredited and vilified him and ran him out of town? Poor guy.
In your book, you mention about flying creatures that you've investigated. Can you elaborate any more on those?
Yes, a little bit. I can definitely talk about those. Now, that to me was the biggest surprise, that there could be unidentified flying cryptid. Now, the one that really got me the most was tales of pterosaur-like creatures, actual descriptions of pterosaurs. Now, there's a few. There's definitely a few around that made the rounds, but my favorite one was came in 2017 as well, I think, in August, in Shropshire, in a place called Whitchurch, where a lady that's next to a bird reserve, and she lives next to it. She's very used to seeing the different types of birds and animals out there. Heard a strange screech coming from the woods and saw two large pterosaur-like creatures. She called them pterodactyls, flying out, big leathery wings, dark sort of grey-brown kind of colour, and a very, very odd call. Flew straight past her, over her head, and off into the woods. A few days later, her son comes in and said he saw a strange bird with bat wings fly over the house. And it's just stuff like that comes on. We have, of course, the Owl Man. Everybody knows about the Owl Man of Morning. And you've probably heard of that. And those two girls that first saw it, creature sometimes emits a strange screeching or hissing noise or an electrical crackling noise. 5 to 6 foot tall, grey-brown owl with pincer-like claws. It's strange. A bat beast of Kent. And that's, I think, from the 60s. 4 teenage friends walking home from pod in the county of Kent see a mysterious flickering light descend into a nearby field in Sandling Park, and something makes its way to the edge of the trees, and they notice this figure, which was 5 feet tall, big webbed feet, wings on its back, and no head. Looked like a headless bat.
Wow.
It's amazing. One of my favourite ones is the Batman of Sight Hill Cemetery. I don't know the date on this one, actually. I don't have it in front of me, but I do know it by memory. And basically, somebody is driving home at 4 a.m. I don't know if they're a shift worker or whatever's happened. They've recently moved into this neighbourhood in Glasgow near Sight Hill Cemetery. They take a wrong turn, so they sort of pull out and turn around. They see a large, dark, bipedal figure dart out of the cemetery. They look as it's sort of moving down the street, and it looks like a tall man, all in black. It seems like it's wearing a cowl or something like that. Anyway, this long black cloak. So he gets curious, and the driver drives towards it, and it starts running down the street. And he's driving at 30 miles per hour, and it's ahead of him, moving fast. Eventually, it stops at the end of the road next to this large wall, and he goes towards it, and it leaps 20 feet into the air over the wall and disappears. So there's things like this, strange sightings, very, very strange things, and more come in all the time. With some of them, it's hard to say what the person was seeing, and with others, they seem to be too explicit to believe, with the current paradigm of what we think the world is and what should be in it.
I know that you've had quite a bit of contact with Lauren Coleman, who obviously is probably one of the most famous cryptozoologists in the world. I know that he advised on the Mothman movie. Do you know of any similar sort of Mothman stories in the UK? Or
I don't. I mean, I considered the Owlman to be a type of Mothman for a while, really, because of this shape and the glowing red eyes that it's said to have. And I always thought that this headlessness, or this head in the middle of the chest kind of aspect of the Mothman was just to do with the blackness of the creature. You know, next to you couldn't make out the beak, or you couldn't make out the mouth as much. I haven't really looked into a lot. A lot of my friends really look into it. I know that Seth Breedlove, who's a friend of mine, he did the Mothman of Point Pleasant, one of his, isn't it? Right. And one of the models done by Jean St. John, who does the Cryptid Replica company, who's a great artist, was used in that. I was in the Cryptozoological Museum when I went there. So I spoke at Lauren's conference last year, along with Jeff Meldrum and Todd Disotell and a bunch of other awesome people. And that was Joe Citro. That was a great thing to meet him. He was a very, very, very lovely guy. I mean, I'm sure he gets a lot of attention, but he was super lovely and very, very humble. And we were having a funny little conversation recently because I kept calling him in like little tweets the undisputed King of Kong, which sounds kind of cool, right? But Kong over there means like penis or large penis.
I was just going to say it sounded a bit pornographic.
There you go. And I asked him. I've been thinking of starting the podcast. I'm not sure if I'll do it, but I'm thinking of it. And I asked him if he would come on if I did it, and he said, "I'll come on. Come on one condition, that you stop calling me undisputed King of Kong." And he gave me
you'll have to get some really nice 70s music to go along with that podcast.
I know. You know, some sort of funk guitar for sure. Definitely needed for sure. Anyway,
yeah,
I mean, they're all lovely. And what actually happens when you get out there and you meet some of these guys who've managed to make a career out of it, you see that they've gone through a lot of you see one that it's not easy to make any kind of career out of it financially, because you know it's like a calling of passion in a way, isn't it? And there's not a lot of money in it. And two, you see that they're like a community, so people generally help. They help you, you know, even if that's gently pointing you in the right direction through a private message, which I get now and again, saying, "I just read your article on this, and really, you know, a couple of miles out on that one, you know, why don't you read this and have a think about what you've written?"
Charming.
It happens, yeah. You know.
Yeah, no, but I mean, yeah. I think that in the main, people in this sort of whole field, and it crosses over into the paranormal stuff as well. I think people tend to be quite respectful of each other. I think everyone has a passion to, those people that are serious about it anyway, have a passion to want to learn more and want to know more, and everyone's after the same thing. And yeah, so I think there does seem to be quite a bit of cooperation around Definitely. Those things. I've got two curveballs to throw you before we go.
Oh, great.
I just wanted to ask you. Okay, so the first thing would be, if you could be the researcher who finds any type of cryptid, what would be the one that you would most want your name attached to?
It's a hard one, really. I think normally I would say like a lake monster, any lake monster, not necessarily, but or necessarily, but I did some kind of like one somewhere.
I was waiting for that.
I couldn't stop myself. Yeah, I mean, not that one particularly, because it's so maligned, that one. You know, anybody who claims anything, it's almost like I know we're not supposed to swear so much, but you said it's fine here. It's almost like a cryptozoological clusterfuck, that area. You know, yeah. It's so many people have gone up there and looked for it, and it's got such a reputation. Even, I mean, think of Rob Rines and what was his cameraman's name? He was a lawyer and a patent clerk, and he invented all these things. And then I forget the guy who went up with him, who invented all of that camera and sonar technology, and actually the camera that photographed the nuclear explosion, right? He invented this stuff, and they went to Parliament and they presented their evidence, and they were just discredited and made fun of. And these were super intelligent guys who had a CV for invention and for discovery longer in your arm. They had so much credibility, and yet still, you know, it didn't matter. It did not matter. And I think that'll be the case for a long time. I would prefer to discover something, for practicality's sake, that's not supposed to be here, but that we know about, like the big cats. If I could discover that they are here in a certain number, and somehow, you know, be integral in setting up monitoring of their populations, and some kind of study of that, where we can find where they are. We are looking for them. We should be able to find where they are, because we can find other cats in countries we know they're in. We're just not looking. That would be the one for me. I'd like that to say, okay, he discovered that there were actually big cats here, or he implemented the procedure with which we started finding them and monitoring them and making sure their population was okay.
You've actually partly answered my next question, because the second part of the curveball was that if you were to find a creature, obviously there's always a risk that there may be other parties, trophy hunters, etc., who would be quickly on the scene, and human nature, they're going to try and grab it for themselves. So how would you protect that particular animal or species?
Hey, that's like Harry and the Hendersons.
Well, exactly. But I know it's a family movie, but that's exactly the case, because they find something that actually, as far as they were concerned, was something unique and special and needed to be protected. And they realised that it had a personality and it had benefits, really, not only to its own kind, but to maybe us to learn about it. And yet there's people after it. So, yeah, have you got anything in place so that if you should happen to find something, have you got people that you can call on?
It's not particularly cool on this point, but I do have, in the last chapter of my book, Preparation for Preservation, there I talk about a conversation I had with Cole Super about a proposal I had called the Unknown Species Act, which was essentially that any unknown or discovered unknown or out of place animal would automatically be given protection, not only in itself, but in its habitat, and there would be a duty of candor, of a legal duty on persons who experience or witness it to report it to the relevant agency. I wanted to table that and put it to Parliament. And he very kindly said, well, first of all, the issue you've got, Andrew, is that you can't put in place a protection for something that's not yet known to exist. Fair enough. And, two, it's when you have to go to Parliament, to get a motion tabled, it takes so long. You have to have so many signatures, and then you wait every day to get called forward, and maybe they do it, maybe they don't. So it's not really in a good place right now. But I would try to establish existence first. Now with the big cats, we don't have a lot of guns or hunters here. I think the likelihood of harm coming to them is quite low, and since we're not discovering them by ourselves anyway, it's unlikely that people are going to be able to go out there as trophy hunters and just find them. Things like Nessie or the British Bigfoot or whatever else, I think those creatures have managed to keep themselves hidden this whole time anyway. I don't think somebody discovering and proving that they're there is suddenly going to endanger them in any way.
Okay.
I don't know that. I don't know. I mean, I don't want to disagree with you, but there are a lot of really ignorant people in the world. That, I mean, there are movies about things like this. Look at E.T. That obviously is a bit different, but in a sense it's not. Because as soon as there's any sort of tension, people from everywhere come, and maybe people in the UK would be more protective, but, I'm American, and there's some crazy Americans in the world, that
I understand.
That bit's not going out.
Yeah. Well, I understand from American perspective, since you have arms to begin with, and you have regular hunting seasons, and people can go out and hunt anyway. It's a natural part of life there. That such creatures could be more at risk if that was the case, if their particular habitat was discovered. But even to own a gun here, it's very difficult, and you have to either keep it in an armory, or if you're a farmer, you get to keep it under special conditions, a certain type of gun. These aren't the kind of guns you could go out with really and hunt a Bigfoot with, or gun down a lake monster, if you could even get that close to one. And also, I think in this country and in this world as things stand, the environmental movement is so strong anyway that any discovery would immediately have a protected habitat without saying. It would happen overnight. They wouldn't say, well, let's kill one and find it and cut it open, because the backlash would be too strong. I think there would be some sort of monitoring of population, and maybe thereafter in the future, more scientific study. I don't think it's going to happen personally. I think, let's say from the woodrow's point of view, from the British Bigfoot point of view, if these creatures actually are here, like people are saying, who are describing them, have managed to stay away from us in our modern, and our modern ability to monitor and search for things so effectively, so wholly almost, I just don't think we're going to find them. I have no hope whatsoever of Nessie or Bigfoot becoming creatures in our, in our modern day, or part of our known flora and fauna. Just don't think it's going to happen. I think they're going to maintain the distance. They're going to stay as the number 1 and 2 hide and seek champions of the world.
Andy, thank you very much for your time here today. We've come to the end of the show.
Yeah, I loved it. Thank you.
No, that's all right. Thank you very much for coming on. Where can people learn a little bit more about what you're doing?
Best place to go to is Facebook. So you go to facebook.com/, Beasts of. You'll find me there. I'm under Twitter, Beasts of Britain, Tumblr, Instagram, Beasts of Britain, same thing. Pinterest as well, if you like. I've got a book online on Amazon called Beasts of Britain. You can find it there. At the end of January, there's going to be a whole second version, a whole entirely new version. So there'll be more chapters, there'll be more pictures, have a different cover, and of course, Beasts of Britain map, which will be coming out at the end of January too, and where you can buy that will be listed on my Facebook page as well.
And of course, later on this year, you've got the Beasts of North America that you're going to be
Yes,
releasing.
working hard on. So I hope to have that. I hope to have it done later in the year. I'll probably try and release it for Christmas. Actually, I've got so much to get through, and of course, the TV thing. I'm still working hard on that. If I don't get a buyer by the middle of the year, I'm going to film it myself. I'm going to get some friends in, and we'll do the series ourselves, and then put it on Amazon and Vimeo and everything else. So it's going to happen regardless. Just the method as to how that happens is still up in the air.
Well, we wish you all the luck in the world with that.
Thank you.
Yep, and when you do get rich and famous, we'll be calling you back.
Yes. Please do.
When you do release those things, if you want to call us back or, get in touch, obviously we'd be more than happy to have you on the show again, and you can tell us about where you are with that as well.
I'd love to come back on, and it's so nice. I recently been in the US, Bella, so I've got a very deep fondness for Americans at the moment. And of course, Shelley, my homeland, calling to me through your voice there, it's very warm and very welcoming as well.
I'm with you, brother.
Thank you, buddy. Thank you. Okay.
You look after yourself. All the best. Thank you very
too.
much.
Have an awesome one. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Well, I don't think I'm going to want to go swimming for a while unless it's in a swimming pool. And I certainly don't want to go in the woods.
Well, we went in the woods today to take the dog for a walk.
We had our dog, our trusty little wimpy guard dog.
Girly puppy.
Yeah, she's like Princess. That's what we should have named her. A poofy little princess. But anyway, did you like it? I thought it was pretty cool.
Yeah, it was really good. Check Andy McGrath out. Check out his stuff. Make sure you get that Beasts of Britain book and the map that he's got coming out so that you can learn all about the things that are going on around the UK. And until next time, please stay weird, wacky, and wonderful.
Bye.